It's time now for the award-winning #1 local talk show in Northeast Pennsylvania, The Sam Lesante Show. Now here's your host, Sam Lesante.
Welcome everyone to The Sam Lesante Show. Folks, we're doing a three-part series, as you know. The topic is how elections affect our lives. The first series, we had Congressman Cartwright on and former Congressman Barletta. And this is the second series. On this show, we'll have Congressman Dan Meuser responding to how elections affect our lives. And we see it every day, what's happening. I'm happy to be joined by Rick Morelli as one of the panel political analysis, former chairman of the Luzerne County Council, and of course Charles McElwee, who is the editor of Real Clear Pennsylvania. On the phone now we have Congressman Dan Meuser. Dan, how are you?
Doing great, Sam. Pleasure to be with you as always.
Okay, and I know that you wanted to be here in person, but you got a lot on your plate, and you've been here all the time. I've never called you once when you refused, and I appreciate that. You don't hide from anybody, and I appreciate that, okay?
And I appreciate you keep calling.
Yeah. Dan, the question is this. We have elections, whoever is in office, whatever they do affects our lives. So give me your response to that.
I've been in elected office now for 5 years. As you know, I did 3 terms, my third term in the U.S. House. I did serve as Secretary of Revenue from 2011 to 2015. And there, frankly, I found that role very rewarding. I came out of the business field for almost 25 years. And in business, results aren't the best thing. Results are the only thing. You run a company based upon outcomes, based upon taking care of customers, based upon under-promising and over-delivering, exceeding expectations, not setting expectations high, not achieving them, and then blaming it on somebody else as to why you didn't achieve them. And that tends to be the case in politics, and I think people are very fed up about that. Government tends to promise a lot and deliver less. Now, I come from the belief as a conservative, as a Republican, but what that really means, I'm a problem-solving, common-sense individual who does believe, what I do believe is that government is best which governs least. That's what our Constitution was based upon. We were based upon limited government. The Constitution limits the government and expands freedoms, not the other way around. And look, it's not just Republicans that feel that our government has gotten too big. Just look at the metrics. Look at it objectively. I think everybody knows that our government is way too big. So, when it comes to elections really determine the course of our country moving forward. So it is a serious public responsibility, a personal responsibility. It's part of being a good citizen. I mean, we're not going to make it mandatory because I guess that could infringe upon somebody's freedoms, but people should feel that it is. So number one, vote, and vote as informed as possible.
Yep.
And vote based upon policies that will benefit you, but more importantly, benefit the greater good of strengthening the United States of America, both national security-wise, economically, and yes, our freedoms, which really is what our country was based upon. Our country was founded based upon freedom, not based upon great business aptitude, not based upon having the strongest military in the world, which we have and we need, but really based upon freedom of choosing what school you want to go to, what job you want to have, what sort of career, who you want to marry, and how the type of quality of life you want to lead.
Congressman, good to talk to you again, and happy birthday. I know it was your birthday about a week ago. But always good to talk with you. Congressman, there's a big election coming up this year, lot on the plate, a lot of issues. In your mind, what are the top 2-3 topics, issues that people really need to pay attention to that could make a major difference in the next 4 years if they choose the wrong issues?
Rick, I think you and I have a lot in common in that we try not to just be ideological about our parties, that we look at what is best for the overall good. And so I do think national security should be on everybody's mind, and there are subsets to that, and our economy. So within national security, we have the border. I've been to the border 3 times. I mean, the border went from bad to worse to now a catastrophe. And the Biden administration has just sort of woken up to it and kind of saying, okay, look, I'm going to do this. But, what they're looking to do is way too little. It's too late, but, we still have to resolve this terrible problem. And we need measures that will actually do it, as opposed to catch some good sound bites on many of the networks. So the border is a really, really a terrible situation, completely created by, there's no other way around it, by the current administration. And because it wasn't like this beforehand, I mean, they changed everything the former President Trump had. And it has become a real disaster. Drugs, human trafficking, cost on Americans, people dying, criminals coming across, hundreds of people on the terrorist watch list. I mean, I like to think we're the party of common sense. The plan that, we got to be people of common sense. The idea that little course correction is even being discussed by my colleagues and friends to the left is outrageous. I mean, that's number one. Energy situation. I mean, even just recently putting a pause on LNG exports does not make sense. Doesn't make sense to us. Doesn't make sense to our European allies who want to buy our LNG and who stopped buying it from Russia. Certainly the other issues are on the economy. I mean, this administration wants to raise taxes. They want to increase more spending. They institute more regulations. I mean, literally, according to the CBO, over $300 billion of regulations, largely on small businesses. Try to get a federal permit. I mean, and the state isn't much better. So I would say, the border, the energy policy, our military plays into this in certain ways. Spending, taxes, regulations. And inflation. I mean, inflation right now, most of my district comes away from the grocery store shaking their head saying, I cannot believe how expensive everything is. Yep. And there's no reason for that. We need to be have more supply side. Yeah. The left doesn't like that language. Supply side focus, pro-growth focus. Yeah. On creation and growth, economic growth, as opposed to the growth of government.
Congressman, on the note of the economy, President Biden remains all in on that Bidenomics message, and he has visited Pennsylvania numerous times touting the benefits of Bidenomics. What is your sense of how that message is playing out, how it is being received among the constituents you speak to in your district?
Well, it's not received well. They scoff at it, and I think that the Biden folks did not use that term for a while. We had a recent somewhat decline in inflation and a pretty good unemployment report, but the facts remain that since Biden got into office, inflation has increased, and this is core inflation, by 18%. 18%. Since Biden has entered office. I mean, gasoline is still $1.20 higher than it was when Trump left office. So, the idea and wages are not keeping up. So people are bringing home about $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, depending on their income level, less than they were before. So, and they're running up their credit cards. And because of this high level of spending, because of inflation, interest rates are crushing people too. Buying homes for younger people. So Bidenomics it almost can't work. It's almost like defying gravity, in my view, because their plan is to raise taxes, increase regulations, spend a lot more on government the size of government services, adding 80,000 IRS agents and all of that craziness that cost $80 billion, as opposed to working on making America the most competitive place in the world to do business, to send your kids to school, and to have a high-level quality of life. Because there's one thing the Democrats don't keep in mind, frankly, that the more profits, the more successful a business is, the more taxes they pay. And therefore, the more revenue comes in, the more money to build our roads and make our airports nicer and modernize our overall infrastructure. So that, to me, there's a right way of doing it and a wrong way, and the Bidenomics is the wrong way.
What direction do you think we're going into in this country?
Well, I think people are more informed than ever. I think that there's a fair amount of Biden buyer's remorse because people just were ready for a change, from the Trump presidency, from COVID. And I do think people are now reflective on, okay, let's go back to where the policies were. I can handle a mean tweet from time to time. And I really do think we're going to be getting more serious about who we are in the world. Let's look at that too, right? I mean, we did have world peace. I mean, we just did. There was no Ukraine fight. There was no, in the Middle East, we had the Abraham Accord, not fight, a horrible invasion by a war criminal, Vladimir Putin. Relationships with China were better. Taiwan wasn't being circled as we spoke by the Chinese Navy. So when you have a vacuum of leadership, that's a real problem. So I do think the Americans in general are looking at that. You can look at the polls. I mean, Biden's at 35, 36, 37% approval. And so I hope we get very serious on the House side, the Senate side, and the all-important presidency. And and frankly, I hope we get serious on the state side of things. Pennsylvania can be the greatest state in the union with the right plan for growth, for advancement, for making it exciting, for improving our infrastructure. But we need a vision, we need a plan, we need somebody with competency to execute. No more important than in the White House.
Congressman, it's always a pleasure talking to you. I appreciate the fact that you're taking the time off, and we'll get you on the show maybe within a month or two to further our discussion.
Hey, thanks, Rick. Thanks, Charles. Sam, you're the best.
Okay,
Thank you, Congressman.
that was Congressman Dan Meuser, the 9th Congressional District, running for office. It's funny, you were having this conversation. I said to my buddy here, Rick Morelli, I said, Rick, if you needed heart surgery, all right, and what's the first thing you do? And what did you say, Rick? Well, you want to find out who the doctor is, okay? And what do you want to find out about that?
To find out, is that doctor good? How many surgeries do they have? What's their record? Talk to people. Are they good with the patients? All that stuff. You don't ask, do they tweet a lot? Okay, you don't ask, are they married 3 times? You don't ask who they're married to. You don't care if they're a he, she, it, or what.
Yeah.
You care about what they're supposed to do for you. That's how it works.
Now, is that logical? Because, as I'm getting older, I'm getting dumber, okay? And I've done over 6,000 shows, all right? And I keep on getting dumber because I don't understand the logic and if you get the person who is that's what we look for. But when it comes to running for office or when you're voting for a person, what is it? Oh, he's a nice guy, she's a nice person, nice personality, bull crap, because that's the problems we're having in the country today. Charles, your reaction to that?
Well, political figures are often complicated figures. They're complex, and history shows that many figures, including presidential ones like Lyndon Johnson or Nixon, they were very complex themselves. So I guess it goes back to judge every historical figure by the period of the time within which they were and everything else. But it's multifaceted and
I can't understand the fact that if you're looking for a qualified person, okay, and I don't care whether you hate the person or not, who's the most qualified? So I go back, and I have a very good friend of mine who is the Democrat, and he's a staunch, and I love him dearly. He's really a great guy. But we differ on this. I'm saying, well, what did Trump do so bad? Well, he's a wacko. He doesn't. Well, what did he do so bad? I don't understand. I mean, you know, just Dan's saying the same. We were in good shape in the economy. But what did he do?
You know, I had a debate similar to that the other night, talking with someone, and again, I was just trying to get to the point. I don't care what you tell me, just give me facts on what this person did or didn't, and they didn't. And I told him, I said, do me a favor, do America a favor, don't vote, because you're not helping anybody by just saying, going out and voting, because, I mean, listen, they have their right to vote. Everyone does, don't get me wrong. You have the right to vote however you want. But what we're trying to say is that, you know, when things go wrong, it does come back to the people who voted those people in, okay? And you have to do your homework. And, you know, we could go back and forth here on both Republicans and Democrats and criticize. And it's just, you know, and what we're trying to do here tonight is educate the public, make sure that they know the issues, make sure they understand the people, make sure that the people who are running for office are out there talking about what they are for and what they stand for, not hiding behind just a newspaper ad and vote for me. Yeah. That's what we're trying to do, is educate the public so that the people make educated decisions.
I think it's very frustrating when when Congressman Cartwright mentioned about the fact that you have these inflationary prices. You know, I remember, I like a good rib steak. You know, I remember it was $8.99 a pound, then they raised it to $16.99. Now it's $21.99 a pound, and they sometimes they give you a break and say, well, bring it down to $18.99. I love when they raise prices 50%, and when they knock them down 25%, you see, we knocked 25% off it, but you already gouged me for 25%. Okay,
yeah, right.
And the people on fixed incomes are getting slaughtered. I can't tell you, Charles, and I can't tell you how many times my wife and I are approached. If I'm in Boyers, you know, grocery shopping, they'll come up and say, Sammy, you know, we can't afford this. You know, what can you do? Okay, I say, well, who are you voting for? Who, you know, you're putting these people affecting your life. Just check them out. You know, it's just crazy. I mean,
well, and again, listen, there's one thing that we heard all night long, and you know, I asked one question, but we asked general questions, and every person came back to the border. Right? Every one of these individuals came back to the border as a major issue, and it's things like that you know, you talk to people and say, how do you feel about that? It's horrible. It's the worst thing I've ever seen. And then they say, well, then who are you voting for? Well, you know, we're going to stay the course. Well, if you stay the course, do you realize the damage that we're going to do here? Not for just you and I. I'm thinking about my son. I'm thinking about people like Congressman Barletta's grandchildren. They're the ones who are going to have to deal with this challenge of all the drugs and everything else coming in. And those are things like, how come no one's challenging this? No one's pushing this. And it's bad. It's really that bad.
Charles?
No, the border crisis transcends partisanship when you consider just the composition of this area. In the early 2000s, the border crisis was occurring then too, and with an acuity similar to today, even though today is far worse. But back then, voters in this area, oftentimes Democrat, were frustrated with George W. Bush, who was taking a position on immigration that they did not understand, that did not translate into what they were seeing and what they were watching on TV about the border crisis. And fast forward, those Democrats today are registering Republican, and they're expressing frustration with a Democrat in Joe Biden over the administration's handling of the border. So these policy issues oftentimes transcend partisanship, and they can also lead to a political realignment.
Your article was fantastic in sailing on the Hispanics, you know, in the Hazelden area. Charles McElwee, he's the editor of Real Clear of Pennsylvania. This show, my friends, brought to you in part by Dane Watrow, who is the 116th Pennsylvania Legislative District. He is helping support the fact that we're bringing this information to you, how elections affect our lives. We'll take a break. We'll be back right after this. Well, welcome back to the Sam Lesante Show, folks. Remember, 24/7, all of our original programming, neighborhood programming, ssptv.com, or our YouTube channel. Once again, thanks for making the Sam Lesante Show the #1 talk show in northeastern Pennsylvania. Just so you know, all our shows, these particular series we're doing now will be playing on Comcast in the greater Pottsville area on Channel 190. We're there every day from 7 to 11. In the Wilkes-Barre Mountaintop area, every weekend from 7 to 11 on Channel 92. And thank you, Wilkes-Barre. We were up 32% in viewership in the survey. Appreciate that very much. My panel today is former chairman of the Luzerne County Council, Rick Morelli, Charles McElwee, who's the editor of Real Clear Pennsylvania, looking at how elections affect our lives. You know, we just got our school bill, our county bills in, okay? I remember back, okay, when Randall ran, and I'm not, if it was a Republican, I'd say the same thing. It just so happened to be a Democrat. He ran for the casinos. We're going to eliminate property taxes. We're going to eliminate school taxes. We're going to eliminate all these taxes. And so everyone bought that. They bought it.
Well, and I'm not trying to pick on Congressman Cartwright, but earlier on the show, he brought up about the train going to New York and all the income that's going to come here, and that's going to help bring in all this stuff, and that's going to take away, and it's going to pay for the infrastructure, and it's help with the schools, right, and all that other stuff. So you go back in time, you know, let's use the arena. I think that was probably the same thing that they talked about, and you look at a lot of other things like that, and there was something else that I'm forgetting, but the point is that you're right. These are things that they talk about, and you're going to build it, and all the money's going to come, and the casino, and all that money's going to come back to you.
That's what the whole key was.
Right, and it usually doesn't happen, okay? The money's going to go someplace, but that's the politics of it.
None of that.
Look at this.
They went up. They didn't go
I mean, when people start throwing out 50 million, 60 million.
He was on my show. Rendell was on my show when he was in town, and he said, "Look, we're gonna eliminate I don't know what the school board, the property taxes." Okay, story about my good friend who was a bowler, and he was in the Army, a retired veteran, fought in the war. Okay, did everything he could, and one day I walk in there. We would bowl every week, and he's crying, a grown man. You know, he's maybe 70 years old or whatever. I said, "What's wrong?" He said, "I had to sell my furniture today to pay my taxes." And yet we see people coming in this country today, and we have people who have worked all their lives, paid their taxes, okay, and then what do they get? Because sometimes they're over $200 or $50, they can't get the benefits. And then we see people who are illegal. I'm not being racist. Illegal. Never did a damn thing in this country. They can't give them enough.
They're getting more and more.
They can't give them enough.
It hurts.
It's just pitiful how elections affect our lives.
Right, and those are the tough questions that people have to ask. You know, and how's this happening? Why? And you know, we're not trying to, and we're not insensitive. We're not trying to be tough on people. And you want to, if they come in here, you want to help them as much as you can. But when you just have people coming through the border, and you know what's funny is, and you know, I said this a long time ago. Congressman Barletta said this, and actually Elliot Musk, who's a relatively pretty smart guy, said it recently. The reason why it's being done, is so that the Democrats, there's one party.
Absolutely.
That's why they're doing it.
Absolutely.
I think it is a shame to do it for that reason and just hurt the country. And again, it's not being racist. It's because we're talking about drugs and all the illegal activity coming in, and then you have these people who they're putting themselves at danger too in many ways.
It's sad. I had the sheriff on my show 2-3 years ago from Arizona, who was on CNN, Fox, and he says, when you see what's happening, Sam, you have no idea. Ego, greed, and it's just, I don't think people realize, even people who are in office don't understand how big the government is. They don't know what's going on. Yeah. Like I said, the government, who's the government? I thought we were the government. But you ask them, they have no idea. How pathetic have we become that we don't know who the hell we're putting into office other than it's a Democrat and it's a Republican?
Well, you know, we've been talking a lot on national issues, but I think one thing we've got to talk about are on state issues. You know, in this upcoming election, there are a lot of state representatives. And if I'm not mistaken, I think right now the House is the Democrats are up by 2 for leadership. I mean, you change that around, that makes a lot, there are a lot of changes that take place in Pennsylvania. It puts a lot of pressure on a Democratic governor. So people have to understand how it all works.
Yep.
And other than, oh, I like this person, or I'm always a Democrat, or I'm always a Republican.
Yeah.
Start understanding how it all adds up with each other.
My friends, the series is How Elections Affect Our Lives, and we had the first series with Congressman Cartwright in Barletta, and this series we have Congressman Meuser. Coming up, the third series, we have Rob Bresnahan, who is running for Congress, getting his viewpoint as to what's happening. All I know is that you live it. Facts are facts. As Mike Marcicano says on the show, and that's the way it is, facts are stubborn things. We'll see you next time.